people a chance to come in. Oh. We'll get started here shortly, just giving people a chance to come in. Get going. Okay, get started. So want to welcome everyone back to Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference. We are excited to welcome new participants as well as those of you who are able to attend our conference in the past. We hope everyone was able to attend the sessions last week, but if you did miss that or you want to see some of the other breakout panels that are happening at the same time as this one, it's not a problem. All of our presentations are recorded and they will be available on the conference website soon. So please, everyone, stay tuned for an email of when those will be available for you to go back and watch all of our amazing breakouts and our plenary sessions that have happened. Again, welcome. I'm Bethany Matson. I'm happy to be here for this breakout presentation titled Black Leaders Organizing for Communities with Angela Lang. So on behalf of the Planning Committee for the Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference, I ask that you join me in acknowledging that our University of Madison campus here on the shores of Wuntshek Home Ikla or Lake Mendota resides within the sacred homeland of the Ho-Chunk people, a place they call Dejot or Four Lakes. As the reach of the university extends to the far corners of our state, we also respectfully recognize the inherent sovereignty of the 12 First Nations of Wisconsin. Whether you are watching from this land of the 12 First Nations or from more distant area, we encourage you to learn about the history of the land you are on. As social workers, we have a duty to look critically at the role our profession has played in the attempted cultural genocide and destruction of Indigenous families, such as was the aim of boarding schools in this state and across the continent. This conference is rooted in critical reflection of our work as social workers. Our goal is to bring clarity about the past, but also to challenge and inspire us all to move into action in our work in communities once this conference is over. So we hope this conference provides space for critical reflection, humility, and openness, which will allow us all to reflect, to hear and tell truths, and to move towards action and transformation to support Indigenous rights, cultural equity, and racial equity. With acknowledgement and gratitude, we move forward today in our journey. And so just a few details as we get started. Again, we are recording this session and it will be available later on our conference website. We know that a lot of people are curious about CEUs, and you don't have to worry about that. When you accessed our presentation, you were required to provide your name and email. And so that will verify your attendance and you'll get CEUs for the presentation via email here soon after the conference. Cameras and microphones will remain muted, but we do have the Q&A feature and you can submit questions for our presenter. And there will be time for Q&A towards the end of the session. And so now, without further ado, I want to introduce our presenter, Angela Lang, and tell you a little bit about Angela. She was born and raised in the heart of Milwaukee. She has an extensive background in community organizing. In the past, Angela served as both an organizer and state council director for Service Employees International Union, working on such campaigns as the Fight for 15, and before founding Block, Angela was the political director for Our Future Wisconsin. She is a graduate of Emerge Wisconsin. She is currently the vice president of the ACLU of Wisconsin board and sits on the board for Diversity and Resilient or Diverse and Resilient, sorry, a nonprofit organization that supports the LGBTQ community in Wisconsin. Angela is motivated by making substantial and transformative change in her community while developing young local leaders of color. Her journey in organizing hasn't always been easy, but through it all, she has remained a fierce advocate for securing more seats at the table for those who represent the new American majority. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Angela. Thanks.
Great. I was going to say good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Very honored to be here. Very excited to be here. As mentioned, my name is Angela Lang. I use she, her pronouns, and I am very lucky to help lead an organization called BLOC, Black Leaders Organizing for Communities. We've gotten a lot of feedback and compliments and support about how our model is different, how it addresses some of the most vulnerable needs in our communities, and how it actually centers wellness. So today I will be presenting for roughly about an hour or so. I would love to hear questions and to have a Q&A session and to have a little bit of a discussion. So I want to reserve the last 30 minutes or so for that. So please write down your questions or put them in the chat, and then we'll get to them at the end. And yeah, so I do have a PowerPoint presentation because y'all just don't want to look at me and talk the whole time. And I'm a very visual person and I like to show pictures. So here we go. So what we're going to explore today is electoral justice and what it means to center Blackness in a community-based policy creation, and talk about the work that's happening in Milwaukee and specifically from BLOC as just an example and as a case study. It's one case study. It is one example. No, I don't claim to be an expert or to have all the answers. I can only talk about my lived experience and the work that we've done over the last 4+ years now at this point. We're going to discuss the issues and challenges that people face in the community, sometimes challenges that are often overlooked or things that may not have been previously thought about. And we're going to identify barriers of access to democracy and what it broadly means for engagement, which I think is very timely given all that's happening in our country and in our world at the moment. So a little bit about me. I always like to kind of start off, you heard my bio, but I think it's important to kind of bring my full self into the space so people understand my lived experience and why I have the perspective that I do. So I'm born and raised in Milwaukee, proudly. There was a time I wanted to move far away from Milwaukee. I think a lot of high school students dream of getting out of the city and going someplace new. Unfortunately, I did not get into my dream school in New York. And so I just said, screw it, I'm just going to go to UW-M. And I said that almost out of protest, but by far it was one of the most transformative experiences of my life, and really a lot of what I learned and what I bring to the work today, I actually learned at UW-M. I was really big in student organizing, worked with groups like the ACLU, as mentioned in my bio, did a lot of nonpartisan voter registration, as well as being active in the student government as well. First job out of college was for the Service Employees International Union. That is a labor union, and the locals that we supported were typically home care workers and healthcare workers. So being able to talk to CNAs and nursing home workers and really talk to them about their issues and how to build long-term political power. In 2016, I worked for an organization called For Our Future, where they supported work for the 2016 election. And I was kind of seen as a little bit the in-state funder and being able to support groups on the ground. And then shortly after the 2016 election, for various reasons, I was compelled to help found BLOC and to get in a room with folks and really think about how are we engaging the Black community differently. People don't knock on our doors on a regular basis. It tends to be incredibly transactional, and that just didn't sit well with me. So I wanted to be able to do things different, which we'll get into later on. A little bit about me. I grew up on 32nd in Wisconsin, which is across the street from a private all-boys high school. And I saw that inequity because my guy friends that lived literally right next to that school were priced out of going to their own neighborhood school. They couldn't even afford to go to a school that they lived on the other side of the parking lot of. And I was like, that's not right. My mom, when I was 11, was diagnosed with a terminal terminal illness, and seeing how she had to continue working while also getting treatment was like, I don't have the language for this, but it's not right. But I saw that inequity, and I think a lot of that is what I bring to my work today. And that's just a baby picture of me because I think I'm cute and adorable. And I've been serving side-eye and skeptical looks since 1989 and continue to do so every day. So I want to ground us a little bit in the zip code of 53206. In 2013, I think a lot of folks have seen or read or at least heard about the UWM study that found that it is the most incarcerated zip code in the state, with the majority of its men spent time in jail or prison. People say that even though the study came out almost 10 years ago now, people on the ground and directly impacted folks say that little has changed to suggest that things have actually gotten better in 53206. We've kind of seen it as ground zero for a lot of the challenges in the Black community more broadly. Some statistics is a third of Milwaukee's vacant lots are located in the 53206 zip code. 2/3 of the children in 53206 live in poverty, and nearly 95% of the residents in 53206 are Black. As I mentioned, it is seen a little bit as ground zero, with receiving the lowest health rating or lowest rating for health outcomes from the Center for Urban Population Health, based on quality of healthcare, access to healthcare, health behaviors, physical environment, poverty, and education. That's a lot. Wisconsin more broadly continues to make these worst of lists all the time. At least I think once a year we see Milwaukee or Wisconsin is rated the most segregated, or the worst place to raise a Black child, or the worst place for racial disparities. And so we continue to see the high disparities between Black and white residents and household income. We continue to see alarming mass incarceration rates, and seeing that one out of every 36 Black Wisconsin adults is incarcerated within the state system, and the highest incarceration rate in the country. And so all of these challenges, we only make up 6% of the population, yet these challenges are disproportionately impacting our community the most. And it seems that there needs to be some real organizing to help combat that. And these challenges didn't happen overnight, and so change isn't going to happen overnight as well. And so now that we talked about all those depressing things about the 53206 zip code, there's a lot of great beauty in the zip code. We intentionally moved our office to the 53206 zip code while we cover the whole north side of Milwaukee and target Black residents. We know the extra challenges that 53206 faces, which is why we want to show it a little bit of extra love. So with all of that, that means we have to do things differently. So first and foremost, our model is based around year-round organizing. And so what that means is that we aren't just knocking for an election, saying, hey, don't forget to vote, and then not engaging with people until the next election. That's incredibly transactional, and it's something that we want to avoid. So we are one of the only organizations, if not the only organization in the state, with a dedicated year-round field program, continuing to be able to knock doors in between elections, basically 24/7. Obviously, COVID has put a damper on that, and we've had to adjust how we do that. But it's important for us to still remain engaged with our community and not just anytime during an election season. One of the things that we often do is called relational organizing. It's kind of this buzzword in the last couple years, but honestly, it isn't something new. I think of it a little bit as a telephone tree, right? If I were to talk to you and I organize you and you're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's talk to our neighbors. Let's remind people to vote. You are actually more an influential person to talk to your own community members and your own friends and your families and your own networks than I am. And so I would organize you and say, hey, can you call 10 of your friends? And then they will call 10 of their friends, and then they'll continue that. And it's a way to kind of build this built-in network. I always joke around and say it isn't new. You can't tell me Harriet Tubman wasn't doing things like relational organizing. We've just found a way to kind of modernize it with some apps and some technology and some software these days. But it is a way to broaden out our reach and to make sure that people are, we're utilizing the best messengers. If I'm just knocking on your door and you don't know me, you may not want to hear what I have to say, versus if it's somebody that you do know. We want to expand the idea of civic engagement outside of just the terms of voting. And so what that means is, I mentioned all these challenges in the 53206 zip code. There are people who haven't had their voting rights restored yet because of the criminal justice system. A lot of times people say, oh, you can't vote, I'll talk to you later. And we kind of just remove them from the political and civic engagement process. But there's so many ways that people can be involved outside of just voting, including writing letters to your local elected officials, testifying at city council, city budget meetings, and telling them what you think the city should be spending its money on. And so we're expanding this idea of civic engagement, one, on not just election to election, but more of a year-round focus, as well as making sure that we're including as many people as possible, because it's more than just voting a couple times a year. We're centering those directly impacted. A lot of folks on my team live in the 53206 zip code. Some folks on my team have been through the criminal justice system. There are folks that haven't had their voting rights restored yet. A lot of us have different experiences. Being Black is not a monolith, but it's always important to make sure that we're centering the most impacted people on the issues. As someone that has not been directly impacted by the criminal justice system personally, I do know friends and family members. And so for me, understanding my privilege and being able to center people that have gone through that carceral system is really important to our work. We're all a part of the community we organize. I'm very lucky and very grateful to work with a whole staff of people that look just like me, and everybody in the organization is Black. And I think it makes the work even a little bit more deeper because we live in the same neighborhoods that we're organizing. We're a part of the broader community and we have this shared experience because we feel it on a personal level. We are not immune to the challenges that the community is facing on a broader level as well. And the last thing I'll say, because I try to say this as much as possible, is that you can't organize Black people if you don't love Black people. And what I mean by that is that I've seen candidates, elected officials, organizations pop into our communities, try to extract knowledge, stories, votes, whatever it is, without actually pouring into our communities, and not building that relationship. And that organizing is very obvious when you're not rooted from a place of loving Black people. And I've seen that transactional nature. So I always remind people that you can't organize Black folks if you don't love Black folks. So what does this all mean? With all of these challenges, how do we actually engage potential voters? How do we engage our leadership with all of these things in mind? And this was a New York Times article. It was an op-ed that was written a couple years ago now, that talks about meeting people where they're at, being able to have really localized neighborhood connections, block by block, literally, and on a super local scale. We know Miss Mary that lives on the corner house that has lived in her house for 20 plus years. She knows all the tea in the neighborhood. She can tell you what's going on. Those are the folks that we want to help support. And that means being able to build relationships, train those folks up to also be a resource ourselves, as we continue to build that kind of long-term power. And people talk about it all the time. Oh, we need more engagement. And the reason I think a lot of people don't do it is because it takes an incredible amount of resources, not just financial resources, but it takes a lot of time and energy and patience to have multiple conversations. When people say, oh, I hate Milwaukee, nothing's going to change, why should I ever get involved? Those are really big conversations to have. And a lot of times I see where folks are coming from, but being able to develop people, their analysis, the understanding why Milwaukee is the way it is, why this policy was voted on, or why this is happening, being able to raise people's consciousness. And that takes a lot of time. And sometimes it's very hard to do, and it's very labor intensive, and it can be incredibly emotional, but it is something that we value. And I think one of the things that makes us different and how we're trying to restructure how people engage with our community is making sure that we're rooted so much on a local level, to the point where We have neighborhood local leaders that we can put up the bat signal if we need to disseminate information fairly quickly. A couple years ago, they called off the election temporarily, then it was back on. We were able to utilize our local neighborhood leaders that we have been talking to and say, hey, we need to get this information out. And back to that relational organizing, they were able to call their networks and give out the most up-to-date information when things were changing pretty much by the hour at that point. So a little bit of our story. How do we engage with a community that has been typically left out of the system? Our community has been engaged because people want to extract something from us, but then pretty much don't let us have a seat at the table, continuously leave us out of policy decisions and out of broader organizing. We've seen this trend day in and day out, or at least I did, and that was a big reason of why I wanted to do something different. We start every conversation with, what does it look like for the Black community to thrive? And the answers to those questions on the doors are very fascinating. Sometimes people just want to talk about potholes and speed bumps. And we're like, all right, that's not necessarily thriving, but let's get you that speed bump. But what I'm hearing is that you don't feel like your neighborhood is being invested in the way that, say, Shorewood or Whitefish Bay is. And for so long, a lot of folks couldn't answer what it meant to thrive, because a lot of times folks in our community are worried about surviving day to day, and thriving sometimes can even be out of the question. So we wanted to push our team and encourage them to dream in ways that maybe they hadn't been before. Reimagining what it means to be civically engaged, as I mentioned before. And I always include this picture because this is our very first staff picture. Yes, we were all women. That was not by design. It was not intended, but I also wasn't mad at it. A lot of our team has moved on to bigger and better things, and we're very proud of the work that they continue to do in other spaces. The woman in the pink, she started out as an organizer, and now she is my right hand. I literally couldn't function without her. She is our deputy director. And so the first day that we knocked doors, and bless their hearts that they trusted me, because I'm pretty sure it was a cold day, was November 29th, 2017. And we started out with just that thrive question and really took the conversation from there. We really just wanted to listen to people who oftentimes hadn't been listened to. And so the goals in mind that we had every time we have these conversations is that we want to invest in our community and engage with residents to build long-term political power. We want to empower Black leaders with the tools, trainings, and resources needed to organize our community. And through coordinated political action, ensure that Black issues, concerns, and values are represented at all levels of government. These are the three things that really kind of center us, and everything that we do tries to definitely fold into one of these three buckets, if not multiple. So with all of these things, how do we do it? I mentioned a little bit one-on-one at the neighborhood level, one person at a time, block by block, which was a big driver of our name, around a bold, proactive agenda on issues that are important to Wisconsin's Black people, by training a new generation of leaders willing to confront white supremacy. Training and leadership development is my jam. Our team goes through sometimes daily trainings or at least weekly trainings to make sure that they're always brushed up on their skills. Through actions and ongoing civic engagements. We have a block agenda that we solidified and ratified with the community in 2019. After about 2 years of knocking on doors, we started to hear some trends, and there was roughly 10 issues or so that came up that we saw, and we wanted to tease out a little bit more. So we had the community come together on a Saturday. We had butcher paper everywhere. We trained our ambassadors and our team of how to facilitate these small group discussions, and each group was a different issue area, whether it be transportation or healthcare or education. And we said, let's brainstorm. What do we want to see? What do we want to expand? What do we want to edit? What do we want to get rid of? What is our vision for this issue? And then a couple of weeks later, we compiled everything that we heard from the community. And then we came back with the same group and said, okay, it's on paper. How do we feel about this? Is there something that we're missing? And then we were able to ratify it with the community. It is currently on our website at blockbyblock.org. You can read the full agenda there. It is meant to be a living document. We did go through this process pre-pandemic, and a lot of things have changed. The world has changed. And so we're looking to revisit that on an ongoing basis to make sure if there's anything else that needs to be added in, how we're having those conversations. And so we're looking hopefully sometime this year to being able to have another convening just to gut check where we're at with the community. And the last thing and the last way that we build power is in solidarity with other communities of color, because we know an injustice to one is an injustice to all. And I say that because it is so important for us to be working in solidarity with other marginalized groups, whether it be with the Latinx community or the Hmong community or the LGBT community. It's important for us to be intersectional with our work because we understand that our liberations and our freedoms are tied to each other. And especially with Milwaukee being incredibly segregated, we are able to hopefully kind of come together strategically and not be segregated by these bridges that literally divide us. We know that once you cross this bridge, you go from the north side to the south side. We want to bridge that as much as possible. So we have very deep and close, meaningful relationships to other organizations in Milwaukee and across the state. And so I mentioned 2018 takeaways. Why am I talking about something almost 4 years ago? It's because that was our first full year. We wanted to do things differently. So there was a lot of trial and error. And so I always try to highlight our main takeaways that we found from 2018. Our team, they did all of this work in the last midterms, and they were like, I canvassed before, but this is a little bit different. I want to run for office. I never consider myself as political because we have given them so much of the tools and trainings and resources that they now see themselves a part of a space that maybe they hadn't considered before. There was a hunger for more voter education. There were quite a few times where they would get back to the office, it would be a couple minutes before their shift is over, and they're asking me questions like, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. And I love to use the whiteboard. I love to draw things out with the dry erase markers. And I noticed it was almost time for their shift to be over. And I said, I started to erase it and said, we could talk about this tomorrow. And they were getting mad that I erased it. And they're like, no, Angela, don't leave. Like, let us talk about this. So they had an opportunity to go home early and end their shift early, still get the same amount of pay, but they chose to stay because they were just really interested in learning more. With both of those things in mind, how much work they had done, how much they had learned, they were really intentional about making sure that they were holding people accountable. They had done all this work. They started to understand how the different civic engagement systems work, that they wanted to make sure that their voices were also being heard even after an election. So hearing that, we use that to kind of form the basis of our programs in 2019 and even till today. First is our ambassador program. You've heard me use the term ambassador. For folks that are familiar with, political programs or field programs, people usually talk about canvassing. Well, I think that we treat canvassers like they're disposable. We kind of treat them like they don't matter, unfortunately. And so we wanted a better name to fit what they actually all do. And so while I may be doing things like this, they are actually they're the faces of the organization. They're the ones that are talking to voters and to residents day in and day out, talking to them about the issues, the things that they care about, plugging them into different training opportunities. And we put them through roughly 30 hours of training before they even knock a door, because we want to make sure that they understand the difference between, say, a state senator and a US senator. They need to understand who to call if, the trash hasn't been picked up. Is that a city issue? Or is that a county issue? So we put them through a lot of training. They're basically baby organizers. So we kind of changed the term to be ambassador because we felt it was a little bit more fitting. The second thing is that there are people that saw that we were knocking in the 53206 zip code, a zip code that, as I mentioned before, with all those challenges, sometimes people just don't even bother to engage. And so when people heard that we were knocking doors in that zip code, so many people were asking what we were hearing. And one of our organizers at the time said, well, you want to know what we're hearing? Come shadow me. And so we turned it into the Silent Canvas program. And one of the very first people that did this program with us happened to be my state senator. So I texted him afterwards and I said, how did it go? This is our first time doing this. What was your experience like? And he said, Angela, I saw the best and worst of Milwaukee in a span of 2 hours. And they literally just silently, the silent is important in the silent canvas part, but these elected officials and these partners, they shadow one of our team members as they're having that conversation about what it means to thrive. They're hearing things on a direct firsthand basis and maybe neighborhoods that they have not traditionally represented before, or just may not have a lot of experience with. That program has blown up far past our wildest imaginations. We've had presidential candidates do it. We've had partners, we've had media. NPR kind of shadowed us one time to do it as well and wrote an article. And now people have done it in other organizations across the country. And we say, if this is something that fundamentally changes how people interact with our community, by all means use it. Just please give credit to the Black women that have created it at Block. Third, because there was such a hunger for our voter education, we developed a 10-week training program to teach people about civics. It's more in depth, and there's a lot of leadership development that we can get into later on. We have our block captain program. That's our relational organizing program. So when we do have to put up the bat signal, our block captains and our leaders are the folks that we talk to, and they kind of disseminate information to their neighborhoods and to their networks. And then being able to have different budget campaigns and advocacy programs. We do work around the budget and work with our partners at Liberate MKE, as well as other criminal justice and other issue-based areas. We've are interested in so many different issues related to not just criminal justice, but everything from redistricting to making sure that we have clean drinking water and getting rid of the lead laterals. And those are issues that also intersect with the criminal justice system as well. And so outside of all of that, what did we actually produce in our first year? In our first year, our Silent Canvas had 50 plus participants. Our field program with our ambassadors that I mentioned that were knocking doors, that was our largest team in 2018, that picture at the bottom. They were able to make over 227,000 door attempts and talk to over 20,000 people. For context, the 2018 elections for governor was decided by roughly 30,000 votes in the state of Wisconsin. Not saying that 2/3 of them came from us, but just goes to show kind of the scale and how as things are very, very close, even having conversations with people that typically aren't engaged can be the difference in an election. We have that meaningful engagement because we ask people about their issues and ask them to dream about thriving. And then again, expanding civic engagement, relational voting, and then expanding the base and the electorate. We want to make sure that as many people as possible are able to be engaged, whether they're new voters or not yet able to vote. There's still a place for them in this process. So we're going to pivot a little bit to the challenges of COVID and how that has changed our organizing. This is from a documentary a few years ago about the April election in 2020. For those that may remember, it was what we refer to as a pandemic election. We were the first state to be forced to vote in person with a pandemic. And there was a lot of challenges, a lot of back and forth, a lot of decisions that were tied up in the legal world that we had to constantly make sure we were getting the information out. But one thing that we wanted to kind of center our understanding of what was happening was that we knew that people were going to get sick, and those people were going to be Black and brown folks who were disproportionately impacted by COVID. And conveniently to some, that's the same group of people that can make or break an election. And so a lot of us felt that the pandemic at the time was being weaponized as a form of voter suppression, as our communities were disproportionately impacted by COVID, and yet also are the same ones that everyone is very interested in and doing focus groups on. And, what are people of color thinking about when they're talking about the election? So we saw that intersection in 2020. I like to lighten it up. These were some good pictures. The first picture was obviously pre-COVID, not much before pre-COVID probably though. That was our team in the beginning of 2020. We have a fairly big team at some points. If you see, I look at this picture and I'm like, that's our family right there. That's exactly who we are. We have a lot of fun. We joke around and we're there for each other. But we also get to work. As you see the other three pictures, we had door hangers to make sure people knew how to vote early. We had yard signs that people could put in their yards that said, I'm a Block voter. But also because we wanted to be inclusive, we had yard signs that said, I can't vote, but you can. So again, being very mindful to include as many people as possible in the civic engagement process. And the picture on the right was one of our last events before the November election. It was actually on Halloween. We threw a Halloween party at one of the early voting sites. And so we had, games and costumes and candy for kids. We had a food truck. We had a DJ. There were so many things that we had, and, people were able to, cast their ballot and then come hang out with us, or people wanted to hang out with us. And we told them, hey, don't forget, there's early voting right up the way across the parking lot. So, doing things like that and trying to make events fun and build a strong sense of community is important for us. And again, one of the reasons I think our program is different, because as you see in the pictures and the smiles and the laughs, we try to make sure that we're building community, because at the end of the day, while politics is incredibly important, we need to make sure that we're showing up for each other in a tangible way as well. And so after the pandemic, what did we end up doing? We had to pivot. We couldn't be out in the field the way that we wanted to. We couldn't, knock on doors 4 or 5 days a week like we traditionally would. And so we had to pivot to calls and texting. And we made over 235,000 phone calls and sent over 500,000 text messages. And that was all done by 73 people. Those are our 73 ambassadors in 2020. And I point out this slide in particular because they did this work day in and day out. They did it tirelessly. They showed up and they dug in deeper when times got tough. And I always want to acknowledge that they were not immune to the same things that COVID was doing to our broader community, the economic insecurity, the anxiety, increased mental health challenges, the domestic violence challenges when everyone had the stay-at-home order. Sometimes home wasn't safe for people. And so with our folks being a part of the community that we organize, they felt those same challenges as well while they were continuing to engage and organize our community. And I think that just speaks to the power of them as individuals, and how, one, I'm so lucky and grateful to continue to work with such amazing, dedicated people, but it goes to show how tight knit and how important the work is individually and for our whole team. Just because you're an organizer or an ambassador, that doesn't mean you're suddenly immune from the challenges of the broader world. And so again, we pivoted. We try to figure out, how do we make sure that we're keeping our community safe? How are we choosing wellness? And how are we just engaging with people in ways that maybe they weren't able to be engaged before? And so in the top left, we had a Fuel the Vote event at the Pfizer Forum. We teamed up with a couple different partners, and it was a mix of, hey, let's make sure you're registered to vote. If you're already registered, sign a pledge card. We'll mail it back to you as a reminder, all of those things. And then people also could get boxes of food, because this was times when times were challenging. We had gift cards for grocery stores on deck. So being able to support people in multiple ways, not just saying, hey, vote for the election, as there's very real challenges that people were dealing with. There were times people were getting text messages from candidates that said, hey, donate to me. I need your help to win this election. And it would be, April of 2020, rent was just due, and everyone's trying to figure out how to pay rent because they're suddenly working from home or may have lost their jobs or what have you. And so we didn't want to be that organization that was, again, trying to just tell people what to do, extract their votes and their voices without actually caring about them as full people. And so there are times, as we got close to the election, we were mindful in how often we talked about the election. We were more focused on letting people know, yeah, there's an election. We could talk about that if you want, but how are you? Do you need to be connected to resources? We were able to put a bunch of resources on our website, able to give out locations of food pantries, or if Milwaukee Public Schools was giving out food boxes, because with kids at home, they may have only gotten their only meal at school. So letting people know about the various resources that were existing in the community was incredibly important to us. And as you see in the right, Sean and Leona are happy to do that work. They thrive when they're out in the community and able to have those one-on-one conversations, not just about politics, but about people's well-being and how we just show up for each other. And so kind of going back to why is our field program different? Why is our model different? First and foremost, we do really deep training on systems and structural challenges and the roles of elected officials, not just candidates. I've worked for organizations where people say, hi, I'm with so-and-so campaign, just trying to get you to vote for our candidate, see you on Tuesday. We want to make sure that we're talking to people and saying, hey, do you know that there's an election on Tuesday? Do you know that it's for the state Supreme Court and those are 10-year terms? Being able to, do that education on an individual basis, on an individual level in the field is something that doesn't traditionally happen because those conversations are longer. And then people are always so worried about, I have to talk to as many voters as possible, but we want to take our time. And by taking our time, that means we have longer canvas launches. And what I mean by that is that sometimes canvassers would come in, they hurry up and get their areas that they're knocking for the day, and then they go out. It may be less than 10 minutes, they're in and out the door, because the more time, some people think, the more time you're in the office, the less time you're out talking to voters, and that's just wasted time. For us, we don't hold that view. We actually do a lot of our organizing and our trainings during those canvas launches before they go out. So our team right now, our hours fluctuate with daylight saving time, but our team right now comes in at 11 o'clock. And if they're going out into the field that day, sometimes they don't get out until 12:30, 1 o'clock, because we're debriefing, we're training, we're talking about what are some of the challenges people heard yesterday on doors. Let's workshop that together. Or, hey, there's this new, policy that was just passed. Let's talk about it and maybe role play so you know how to talk about it in the community if it ever comes up. I like this approach because, as I mentioned the numbers a couple slides ago, we still put up pretty decent numbers, even though we take our time. But because we do that, we're able to have more meaningful conversations, and we're able to invest in people as full people and not just say, hey, vote for this candidate. Two things that we kind of do internally and now externally as well. We have a thing called Wellness Wednesday. So you see Jaquana in the pink at the top right with flowers and fruit and yogurt and bagels. On Wednesdays, I try to bring in, snacks. It may not always be like healthy snacks. We don't mean wellness in that way, but something that's like feeding your soul, and being able just to take a pause for the week and acknowledge that, like, okay, it's Wednesday. Sometimes talking to voters can be very emotionally draining, hearing the stories, seeing the challenges. Sometimes, as I mentioned, our ambassadors are having challenges themselves. So this is just a midweek kind of moment where we can take a breather, pause, and kind of come together ourselves. You'll see, at the bottom right, that's Antonio and Dawn. They share a birthday. So I brought in cupcakes and cookies and like to joke around. So we like to have outings. We like to hang out with each other where we can, because we are a close-knit team, but we also want to make sure we're prioritizing our wellness wherever possible. And so over the last couple of years, we've sent out Wellness Wednesday texts. So even though there may not be an election, you'll still get a text message from us saying, hey, this is Block, reminding you it's Wellness Wednesday, encouraging you to make sure that you're going outside to go for a walk, make sure you get some fresh air, something like that. If there's like relevant information, we'll include that as well. But sometimes it's just, hey, we're here to remind you to take a moment for yourself, and that's important to us. And then recently with the pandemic, we have moved to 4-day work weeks. I get a lot of questions, a lot of comments on this. Trust me, it's a lot easier than you think. But Fridays, our team is out of the office. We believe that because our work is so labor intensive, and to sustain our folks and to not burn out our folks, we need to take the extra time where we can. And so our team is off, quote unquote, on Fridays. What I mean by that, I do things like this sometimes on Fridays, but also I tell our team, I will not ask anything of you. I will not schedule any meetings of you. I will not bug you at all if possible. But sometimes people use that time to catch up on writing or to catch up on emails, but it is whatever they want. If they just want to lay in bed and watch Netflix, great. If they want to use that time to catch up on writing or emails, that's great too. So Fridays are really for what people want, but our office is closed, and I do the best to make sure the team is not scheduling meetings where they don't have to. And then we've adjusted our hours too with our ambassador program. When we had to text and phone bank from home, our ambassadors typically worked 6-hour shifts. But when they're at home, they were taking care of loved ones. They were suddenly trying to figure out how to homeschool their kids. And so we knew that we couldn't get 6 hours of work from them if they were working from home. So we adjusted the hours to maybe about 3 or 4 hours of just solid work, but people would still get paid for the full 6 hours as well. So being able to be flexible and to really accommodate people's needs, and again, see people as full people outside of the organization. I mentioned briefly our silent canvas program. So these are just some humble brag pictures. On the left, you see Governor Evers. In the middle, you see Julian Castro. To the right, you see Senator Cory Booker. That's probably my favorite picture. Like the baby, him talking to the baby, the handshake in the background, looks like an album cover. Love it. And then at the bottom, you'll see Beto O'Rourke just a few days after he launched his presidential campaign. Again, our fellowship program, it is a 10-week program. We try to have a small-ish group, so between 10 and 12 fellows. It is paid. We want to make sure that people are being compensated for their time and their learning. It's kind of like a little mini intern program for like those 10 weeks. And so the way it's structured is that there's 3 weeks of training in the office around a particular theme that week. And then they have 3 hours of work out in the field. And so that's either going to community meetings, scheduling meetings with elected officials, knocking on doors. So it's a mix of kind of in-person and field work for a total of 6 hours a week. We continue to engage around budget campaigns and having conversations about what people want to see in their own communities. And a lot of times we're able to talk about how we're investing in our communities from a city budget standpoint. And so the picture in the bottom middle, that was actually former Mayor Tom Barrett. And this is one of my favorite pictures, not just because of how it looks aesthetically, but because the story behind it. The mayor was actually one of the first really big names of folks to come in and talk to our team. And I didn't know how our team was going to react. I know a lot of folks get starstruck by elected officials. They kind of put elected officials on this pedestal. And I was like, I really hope that they don't do that. And they ask very honest questions. And a few minutes before the mayor got there, there was an ambassador that came up to me and had showed me like 3 or 4 pages of handwritten notes in a notebook and said, I was up till midnight researching all of these things. Did you know Mayor Barrett proposed this? I was like, I did not. He was like, can I ask him about it? And I said, go for it. So what I thought, was going to happen, my concern of them, not grilling the mayor or not, really addressing their concerns, that didn't happen. They did not hold back at all, to the point where the mayor was like, all right, I see that y'all aren't the biggest fans of me, but happy to have this conversation. And I was really proud in that moment for them to have a very lively discussion, a very respectful discussion, but a very challenging discussion and pushing back on some of the things that we had seen in our community. And I was very glad that the mayor, the former mayor, heard that directly. And he said that he enjoyed his time as well, even though we put him in the hot seat. I think he benefited from it as well. And then the top right is the man in the white button down is former Attorney General Eric Holder, who we have a really good working relationship with in terms of our redistricting work as well. We nickname him our cousin because when he comes to Milwaukee, or when he comes to Wisconsin, we always make him come to our office, and we have a fairly close relationship with him. These are pictures. I just love to show shots of our team interacting with folks. On the left, you'll see this Wall Street Journal article with our deputy director and her daughter, Joanne, who came up through the ambassador program and is now overseeing some new programs and have been able to be elevated to staff. And so we were very excited that our model was kind of getting out on a broader kind of national level, and people were taking notice. In the bottom middle, you'll see Sheriff Ernell Lucas. This was days before he was formally elected, and before he was formally elected, barring any write-in candidacies, he was going to win, but he knew he still had to talk and engage with us, even though he pretty much had it in the bag, because he knew he had a lot of things he had to repair to our community, and we were one of his first stops, and we appreciated that level of accountability. In the top right, you'll see our constitutional officers, almost all of them. You see the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and state treasurer. All of them have done silent canvases with our team. And then the bottom right, I think that just goes to summarize, our team loves getting along with each other, and they do have a blast being able to be out in the community and talking to residents. And so I mentioned before this example of accountability of right before the sheriff was officially elected, he came in and talked to our folks. He knew the amount of work we put into that election, and he knew our concerns about policing before he was elected. I think he knew that we were a strong, very vocal group. And so to be able to recognize that was really an example of some of the power that we had built that I was incredibly proud of. Our current fight, this is ongoing, but we had been getting involved in the last year or so with some challenges on the state legislative side around criminal justice reform. We know what happened in Kenosha with the shooting of Jacob Blake, and shortly after that, the legislature wanted to have a task force on racial disparities to address, all the things that we had been talking about, and to address the response to the shooting of Jacob Blake. Out of that task force, however, were things that the community did not ask for. There were organizers on the task force that felt that their voices were not being heard. And so when those recommendations came out, we kind of protested them. We said, and we urged the governor to not sign them. We said that we wanted a new process, and we teamed up with State Representative David Bowen, who basically provided his legislative package along with State Representative Francesca Hong, called the Enough is Enough package. Things like relating to contact cards, disciplinary procedures, supporting offices of violence prevention and other prevention programs, talking about use of force policy, and other challenges and that should actually be addressed. I would like to note that this started roughly last May. The Enough is Enough package has not been brought to the floor for any hearings, and is still kind of a little bit in limbo. What I will say though, so you'll see on the left, that was outside of our office. Apparently we didn't make enough noise. So the next week we took our fight to Madison, where you see me speaking on the right, at a press conference outside of the Capitol. After a lot of literally and metaphorically banging the drum, we were able to schedule monthly meetings with the governor to be able to talk about criminal justice reform and what he is able to do using his own executive powers, and just some of the things that we are hearing in the community. So the last maybe 4 or so months now, we have had our monthly meetings with the governor to address some of these things. We still want the Enough is Enough package to go through the legislature. Obviously, with 3 equal branches of government, the governor can't do everything himself. And so we're still wanting the legislature to put forward this package and to vote on it, but we're also making sure that we're using our avenues with the governor as well. And I just want to end on hopefully a little bit of encouraging kind of quotes that I use to kind of center myself, because this world is so challenging. There are days I wake up, just even the other day, where I'm like, am I doing enough? What is happening? Am I even, is any of this actually working? And so these 2 quotes kind of snap me back and continue to push me. And the first one is, no change for the good ever happens without it being imagined first, even if that change seems hopeless or impossible in the present. And the second is, you have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. And so with that, this is my contact information. Block is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We've gotten some requests lately to be on the TikToks. So we're looking to maybe in the next couple of weeks, start a TikTok account. I think we're all a little intimidated by it, by being a little older millennials, but we understand the value of that space. So catch us on TikTok soon. Our website, where you can see the Block agenda, as well as our mission statement and to donate, is at blockbyblock.org. Angela at blockbyblock.org is my direct email. Although if you can send a message through the website, and you can DM us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. So with that, I would like to open it up for questions, and take a look at the questions and go from there.
Angela, can you want me to read these questions or can you?
Yes, please.
All right. So the first one is, I heard you mention training and leadership development. Who facilitated the trainings? And can you let us know if these are offered in other states and communities and if there's a cost?
Yeah, so that's a good question. A lot of these trainings is just stuff that we kind of come up with on the fly on our own. We are really driven by our ambassador program. So sometimes our ambassadors will, say, hey, there's a lot of talk about the filibuster and I don't fully grasp it in the history of it. And so we're like, okay, we'll train you on that. 9 times out of 10, it's someone on our staff, whether it's me or someone else, that are giving these trainings. But a lot of it is playing it by ear based off of the needs of what our team needs and what we feel can be helpful for their development. I want to teach them, I just told them this recently, I want to teach them all the things that no one taught me that I suddenly had to figure out on my own. One of those things is how to even write a script when you're out in the field. Usually people say, here's your script and here's your literature, go forth. I told them I didn't start writing scripts of this nature until 2016, and I kind of had to figure it out. And so what we're doing is that instead of us saying, here's your script, go out in the field, we say, okay, we're going to talk about redistricting. Write your own scripts, run it by us. Let's talk about it. Let's work together, but getting them to think on their own too. So it's that level of support and leadership development. Our team has requested a lot of trainings around communications. Because I do a lot of the communications myself, I'm putting together some trainings like that. It will be an ongoing discussion. Our political director gives out weekly trainings about, the 3 branches of government, how a bill becomes a law, things that would be helpful to our team and the things that our folks request. But I'm very lucky to have a team that's very knowledgeable, that a lot of our trainings can be done in-house. And 9 times out of 10, if we can do it ourselves, we will. And if we can't, we will seek out people that do. So we've also partnered with groups like the ACLU, or Planned Parenthood and different other groups as well. So there are opportunities to bring in partner organizations. So our team is exposed just to other different groups and kind of their models of organizing as well. And so to go to the question about if they're available in other states, they're not, because a lot of our trainings not always are written down. We have like okay, you want to learn about the filibuster? Great. Let me put something together. And then that's our training and that's our handout for the day. And so being very local to the Milwaukee, Racine, and Kenosha area, we have gotten asked to do virtual events and, hey, can you train my team here? We've done that in the past. And there's been a couple times where we've traveled out of state as well to give presentations or to travel to just help other people and just provide our perspective in terms of organizing as well.
Yeah, and then what is the biggest factor in keeping people connected to the organization and or the mission of Black?
Yeah, I think the biggest factor is that everything feels very personal to people. Even things like voter suppression, right? Like they literally are trying to take our voices and our votes away. Like that is very personal to all of us. I think when sometimes it appears that people aren't as invested in the mission, it's actually not true. It's like they're often dealing with personal challenges that doesn't allow them to fully participate with us. We don't have a lot of turnover. Our team is with us. When you're with us, you're with us. There are times where, we'll obviously have to scale up and scale down. We can't afford to have 50 or 75 ambassadors the whole year, but we usually at least try to have between 20 and 25. And so largely, if you put in the work and you put in the effort, we want to retain you, and being able to continue to use the quieter election years as ways to dig deeper into that leadership development and training. And so, some challenges are, we've had to have people not work with us because they were moving, or they were moving out of the state, or they had family obligations, and it was just hard because they maybe now took on the role of a caretaker of a family member and they couldn't dedicate the time to be with us. Childcare issues continue to be challenges as well. We've been trying to address that. If you see my background when I'm ever at the office, like I have like pictures of like what we call block babies, like our kids, like the kids of our team. We always have like Play-Doh and stuff around. So if there is a big childcare issue, even just a couple weeks ago, someone had some childcare issues and I was like, all right, I got blocks, I got markers, I got stuff. So really trying to eliminate whatever barriers that we can, but largely once people have that broader understanding, and it's not just transactional, it's not just, hey, go knock on as many doors as possible and get as many votes as possible. Once we're able to provide that historical context, I think that makes people more bought into the mission and vision. And that's why our leadership development is so important. Last year and in 2020, our team, they were largely phone banking and texting day in and day out. You saw the numbers, they were kind of intense. To break up the monotony of the day, we would give our team research assignments and be like, write a page on the Voter Rights Act, research redistricting and gerrymandering. We would have conversations, and I think more organizers should have this conversation. What's the difference between organizing and mobilizing, right? Getting them to think deeper about things and have them think about the work. And I think that's why when they start to put all the pieces together, this is bigger than us. It's bigger than this organization. There is historical context that has led us to that point. And these are all things that we don't talk about a lot. We don't talk about civics. There are folks, we were able to be in DC in September, and we took a trip to the Black Historical Museum. I forgot the actual name, but the beautiful museum that is like giant and huge that you can't get through in a couple hours. But there are people that were like, they walked out of there feeling a way like, I didn't learn about half of that in school. And so being able to take that time and to provide that historical context, because I think a lot of historical context is really playing out now these days. I feel like we're looking into a rearview mirror and that this is kind of a second wave of a civil rights era. There's a lot to be learned about best practices, how that organizing happened back then, and how we can apply it to today. And a lot of our folks, for obvious reasons, didn't able to get that information. And we're seeing those attacks even now with the conversations around critical race theory, because our belief is that the more people know and understand, the more people want to get involved and engage. It's very hard once you've kind of turned on that light switch, it's very hard to willingly turn it off once you start to see how things are coming together.
Yeah, and just thinking, you mentioned the TikToks, as I like to call it, and getting people on there. And TikTok terrifies me, but it's such a great like resource. It's like something that a lot of people are using. And so just along with that and some of the other things you talked about, another question is how can you get more young people involved and engaged in this work? And you spoke to the context issue, but what are some other ways to like people can work towards getting more youth interested, involved in the political realm?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think first and foremost, we need to treat young people as if they are the power holders that they are, and that they are the gatekeepers to the future, right? I think sometimes we see these intergenerational conflicts where people are like, nope, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know how it's done. You young people, you got to earn your keep. You know, I had to cut my teeth on this. We need to stop that way of thinking. We need to make sure that we are supporting and mentoring our young people. At our team, we don't focus on youth issues per se. There's a partner organization that we talk to called Leaders Igniting Transformation. We don't step on their toes. They lead in the youth aspect. They do a lot of similar work just in the youth realm. So we support them. But I will say that we do have some young people on our team. There are folks that have joined us when they were roughly like 21 and are maybe 24, 25 right now, which I consider young. And then there's a gap. There's only maybe me. I think I'm the only person in their 30s. And then there's a lot of folks either mid 40s, early 50s. And I think our oldest is like 64, I believe. So there's a lot of intergenerational conversations, even internally amongst our team. And I think I try to be very mindful as like, these are new folks that are like, I want to do this for my younger brothers and sisters, or I didn't get any of this and I want to be a local young leader in my community. And it starts by being able to see them as true change agents and not being condescending, not saying, hey, you do this, you have to climb your ladder. No, I want you to be in every single meeting. I want to teach you just as much stuff. I can't wait till I pass the torch. I don't want to do this for the next 50 years. I know some people hold on to that torch very tightly. I can't wait. And going back to TikTok, which I'm so fascinated with, I have like one, I think, video up. But like it's such a powerful tool. You think about how some folks were able to either organize in the presidential election based off of the things that they cared about, but also how they disseminate information very, very quickly. I think this younger generation, specifically the Gen Zers, are incredibly smart and skilled and savvy. And how are we honing that in and not saying, hey, we just need a youth voice, come over here, but like making sure youth are a part of the decision making. They are actually seen as the change agents that they are and not kind of belittled or talked down the way some of us may have been when we were coming up in student organizing. So being very mindful of making sure we're embracing and cultivating the power that they have.
Yeah, that is so important. And just using, their tools to do the outreach. Yeah, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Can you talk about how the community is informed about the benefits of other opportunities, for example, Black grants, et cetera, related to voting and informing the advocacy of the residents? Did I read that right? Yeah.
Yeah, so for us, we want to make sure that we're pushing out as much information as possible about resources. So even just the yesterday, actually, our team was phone banking and they were saying, hey, don't forget that there's an election February 15th. Our favorite website is myvote.wi.gov. Also, shameless plug, there's an election on February 15th. Request your ballot. It's fairly quick. Drop boxes are in effect for this election, maybe not for the rest. But with our level of constant communication, whether it be phone banking or texting, is the way that we're able to give out other resources that are available. Once COVID hit, we knew we had to kind of think like we are not set up and we didn't have the capacity to do mutual aid services. That's just not something that we knew how to do. And we didn't want to enter into a realm that we were unfamiliar with. And so what we did is that we have access to a lot of resources. We have access to a lot of connections. And so while we weren't doing that work ourselves, we were able to say, hey, you need mutual aid assistance and you live in Metcalf Park. Well, Metcalf Park Community Bridges is doing a weekly mutual aid and go here, right? So we were able to use the connections and the leverage that we have to be able to disseminate that information. Even things like recently, the governor was able to give the city of Milwaukee maybe a couple of weeks ago, 500,000 N95 masks. And, we were pushing that out. We were letting people know, hey, if you need masks, go to the city health department. And we started hearing feedback that the lines were long. People were sitting in their cars for like an hour plus just to get like a pack of masks. And so, we were like, hey, can we take some stuff off your hands? And they're like, oh, we're only giving it to individuals. So we called the governor's team. We're like, we got these monthly meetings with you. Let's cash in some leverage here. And we said, hey, can we get our hands on some masks too? And within a couple of days, we had a delivery of 2,000 N95 masks in our office that we were able to give out in a matter of like a day or so. So it's things like that, being like, we know that we are directly able to pull resources where we can and being able to be that conduit and flow that information to the community, to do it very quickly. Like if there's changing election laws, we do it via text message. Otherwise, for like a deeper conversation, we like to do that on the phones, but preferably in the field. But I just don't feel comfortable with our team having face-to-face conversations. But we do have things, and you saw the pictures in the PowerPoint, we have door hangers that say, here's all the ways of early voting, or here are resources. So if we don't reach you on the phones, we do want to make sure that you're getting that information in one way, shape, or form. And then also social media. So we're trying to be consistent and use all of these different touch points, understanding our community can be transient, phones may be off, what have you. So we want to make sure that we're using every avenue as much as possible.
Awesome. And then in the current political environment, what gives you hope?
My team, and I feel like that's a corny answer, but it is the answer I will always give. The team shows up, and if they can show up, given all the challenges that they are going through, I can show up. But also we support each other. We lean on each other. I had somebody call me the other night at about 8:30 that was like, I just need someone to talk to. I'm like, I'm here. I got you. Right. Like, that's how close we are. And that gives me hope to be able to watch their leadership development and to play a small role in that. That is like, whew, that's what gives me hope. Just even earlier this week, one of our ambassadors, well, we had a national news outlet. There's a story, I think, coming out on Tuesday, so watch our Facebook for it. But there's a national news outlet that was like, hey, we want to talk about drop boxes. Do you have anybody that utilize drop boxes? I was like, everybody. So I was like, just come to our office. I got somebody for you. And so the day before, I was like, so who wants to do this interview with me? It's on TV and it's a national news outlet. And everyone's kind of looking around. They're like, oh, I use drop boxes, but I don't know. And one of our Shire ambassadors, she was like, yeah, I'll do it. And we were like, word, okay. And then somebody was like, yeah, she's shy, she's got to do it, let's push her to do it. And so I was like, if you want to prep, let me know, but like, just talk about your story and your experience using drop boxes and why it's important to you. And so, the next day, they show up with their like 3 TV cameras, their big lights and stuff. We're outside, and they're like, who wants to go first? And I look at her and she looks at me, and I was like, should I go first? So you kind of see how it goes. She's like, I'll go first. And I was like, okay. So she went first, and she was very calm. She was very poised. And there were times where she's like, hold on, because it wasn't live TV, thank goodness, because live TV is very intimidating. But she was like, hold on, I want to get this right. Let me rephrase that. And this was somebody who hated getting in front of the room and giving presentations. It's very soft-spoken, very, very good at talking to the community, but there's something about that public speaking. And to see her not only one, be like, I want to do it, and then even afterwards being like, sign me up for more, and seeing where she was maybe a year or two ago and that she would have never done this. Like, that is what gives me hope, and that more and more people are stepping into their power. They're understanding their own leadership. And for me to just like help in a very, very small way, because 99% of it is up to them, but for me to help pull out all of that stuff for them is really what gives me hope. I see their growth. I see their brains, their wheels spinning constantly. And especially our younger people. And it makes me feel that we, although change is very, very slow and very frustrating, slow and painfully slow these days, knowing that whenever I do pass the torch, or whenever I do step out of this role, not anytime soon, our team can handle themselves, and that they are stepping into their power just by being at Block. And that is very meaningful to me.
Oh, that's powerful. And another question was, what do you see as long-term goals for your organizers 5 to 10 years from now? What is the plan for Block for the next 5 to 10 years?
We love having this conversation in the office. There is an activity that I took from a training that I was in, where they were like, close your eyes, imagine your organization is on the cover of Time magazine, and it says 50-year anniversary of this organization. When you open it up, what are the pictures? What are they highlighting? What are they saying? And so we did that activity as a team, and we talked about how, so our Block babies, people that were pregnant when they were with us, we just had a Block baby 2 days ago on 2/2. We were very excited. We were talking about when they grow up, they joined this work. And it's a cycle, being able to expand. Just talked about this yesterday. What does it look like to expand to other states and to have Block chapters in all 50 states? What does that look like? We were very excited to expand to the Racine and Kenosha area. We talked about some of our ambassadors. Some of them love to argue in a very good way. And I'm like, you should go to law school. What does it look like for them to go to law school in the next couple years, come back and be the Block lawyer? We ideally, at some point, whenever we're able to build capacity, we do have some plans. We want to run candidate trainings. We want to run a slate of our own candidates. We want people that previously didn't see themselves a part of the political process to be elected officials, to be campaign managers. I want to train the next generation of Olivia Popes. If they don't want to, be the elected officials themselves, there's a role for everybody to play. And so I think a lot about what does it look like to build this network, this almost maybe national network of Block chapters in various states, and how we're building this power collectively, how we continue to be a leader in the state. People look to us based off of our wellness practices. I get a comment at least once a day about our 4-day work week or something like that. So people are looking to us as an example. So to be able to push the boundaries of what is possible, being able to be a leader and to really shift people's thinking from traditional norms. And then, what does it look like to kind of, one of the things that they mentioned was they saw a bunch of the staff in the White House. They were like, 10 years from now, Angela, you're going to be working in the White House. And I was like, depends on who's there, because I don't know. It's going to take a lot for me to move to DC, especially these days. But, talking about how is Block really embedded in all these different ways, having a strong, robust, youth program that works with Leaders Igniting Transformation, having various, departments. We were just dreaming yesterday, me and our deputy, talking about how great would it be to have a healthcare organizer and to have an organizer that's organizing folks that are incarcerated and being able to support those folks, but having an organizer for every issue we care about, an organizer for every issue that's in the Block agenda, 10 different organizers that are focused on just that thing, being able to scale up our organizing, doing a little bit of the inside outside work, this outside work of pressuring and the grassroots organizing and that base building, but having people be elected, be in elected office, being able to run campaigns, to be in law school, to be giving trainings to other organizations across the country, and to build this network of really strong Black leaders. So while the future is to be determined, I didn't even anticipate we'd be here in year 4. A couple months after we launched, people were like, Angela, you got to come to Racine or Kenosha. And I was like, we just launched in Milwaukee a month ago. Let me figure this out first, and then we took our time, and, we expanded to the Racine and Kenosha area even before I thought we ever would expand. And so I think the possibilities are endless. I think being able to even provide things of like having a Block daycare center, or, our team said that they one time, we joke around, maybe we should just buy a house and, we rehab the house, and maybe it has like 2 emergency bedrooms for people that need a safe place, and it's kind of a community center. Just thinking even bigger of like, how are we able to build like a community center and do things like that, and really kind of see us as a community hub as well. So the possibilities are endless. It's also very daunting and very terrifying to think about, because there's so much work to get done and figuring out how to get there. But there definitely is not a lack of imagination of what our team wants to see for themselves and for our organization just in the next 5 or 10 years.
And we have people from all over the country in here, and someone said you need to come to DC because they need your energy. So they are telling you they want you to show up.
I mean, I love DC, but I don't see myself living there. I was just thinking about visiting in the next couple of weeks, but yeah.
And just kudos for your leadership and, respecting and treasuring your team. Another question is, can you talk about if your team has proposed actionable solutions and operations to officials as far as addressing Milwaukee being the most segregated city in the country?
Yeah, I feel like Milwaukee being segregated, or just segregation as a whole, is a really big nut to crack. And I think it intersects with so many other challenges and issues. I think the big thing that we kind of see is how it connects to segregation is making sure that all communities in all corners of Milwaukee are invested in equally, right? Like, I think of where I grew up, I think of where I am now, and those neighborhoods are not invested the same. And the dynamics and the demographics of those neighborhoods are not the same. I live on the east side, close to UW-M, which is a lot of young students. If you go a couple blocks east, that's the really rich lake house people, right? So that level of investment, even when I'm driving, say to Bayshore, I make this drive down Lake Drive when I'm getting my eyebrows done or I'm going to my place, and I know the instant I get out of the city of Milwaukee, because it's just like bumpy, bumpy, bumpy. Oh, no, we're in somewhere else now. And I know the instant I'm back in the city of Milwaukee. And I think a lot of segregation is rooted in just inequity and what is being invested in and what is not being invested in. Our schools, how MPS is being failed. It's not failing, it's systemically being failed. How are we supporting our public schools that is marginally kids of color? So I think, again, segregation, I think, is a very broad thing, and it's very hard to say, this is the solution. But I think when you peel back the layers, it really goes to show that there needs to be investment into marginalized communities, into some of our most vulnerable communities. There's been a lot of investment in the downtown area. After the Pfizer Forum was built, a lot of folks were worried about gentrification creeping into the Bronzeville area. Bronzeville is a very historical Black neighborhood that we are holding on to very dearly. It is a very beautiful place, and making sure to protect that as well. But the rest of the city doesn't get the same amount of investment and energy and focus as, things like the Pfizer Forum and the streetcar. Those were two big things that both benefited downtown. The streetcar specifically, a lot of folks were like, this is stupid. Why do we need this? And people were like, well, if we have it, fine. Let's make sure to have expansion routes. And I remember at one point, myself included, I was bought into the streetcar because there was a promise at some point, whenever that is, that there was going to be expansion routes. It wasn't just going to focus from the third ward to downtown. It was going to go into places like Brownsville. It was going to go deeper into the South Side. And that's how a lot of us were like, okay, maybe we can get on board with the streetcar. And that's never happened because there hasn't been that level of investment. So we continue to be segregated because we have these bridges and our transportation is set up where we literally don't go from one side of town to another. And it's structurally set up that way.
Yeah, it's very interesting how not only the design, I mean, it was almost like Milwaukee was designed to be the way that it was when they were like laying out this city, because of how, you talked about the bridge going from the north side to the south side.
27th Street, 35th Street, we know those bridges, yeah.
You hit that light and you're like, oh, south side, and so it's almost like by design, and it's interesting that still exists, but not surprising. So,
and our solutions are through our advocacy for our budget work, our city budget work, right? Our city budget comes up every year, and that is an opportunity to talk about how we are investing in our communities as well. So that is part of our solution. So going back to the question, like, I don't think there's like one solution or like, what have we given and say, this is how you do it. I think it's actually kind of baked into all of our work, but I think most notably our city budget work as well.
And someone did ask if you could reshare the quote that you had that motivates your passion for this work.
Yeah. 1 second. Let's see. So there was two. I can share my screen again if people wanted to see it. We can do that.
That's fine.
There we go. Yeah. So the first one, get rid of that. No change for the good ever happens without it being imagined first, even if that change seems hopeless or impossible in the present. And the other is, you have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. I think that second one that hits a little deep for me.
I wonder if in doing your work, do you, because for social workers, especially, oftentimes the stance is that social work and social workers are not political or shouldn't be political. We should somehow remain neutral, even though all the work that social work is about is in the political realm and impacted by what is happening politically, like everything, all of the systems we are a part of. And I wonder if in doing your work, if you get a lot of like people feeling very neutral, just neutral about things that are happening, and how do you address that, or what is kind of your response to neutrality and kind of saying, I don't want to be involved in this particular piece? Like, how does your team address that?
We get that question, or we get those responses on doors a lot. I myself, I try to knock doors. It's been a couple years because of the pandemic, but I try to knock doors at least every election cycle. So I have a pulse on the ground. I know some executive directors get too busy. I will never get too busy to engage with the community, but some people don't, and that's very important for me. And I remember one of the last doors I had a couple years ago with someone who was saying he was about to catch the next train out of Milwaukee because there wasn't anything here for him, and Milwaukee sucks. And then, he may come back, but if he does, he's never going to get involved with anything because the Milwaukee is just so terrible. Nothing's going to change. And I learned this tactic in a previous organization that I hold dear and I think is very important. And it's affirm, answer, redirect. I think it's less the redirect part. That was usually like if you're persuading somebody or something. But it's important to affirm people's feelings. I had been that person. Depending on the day when I wake up, I also wonder, what am I doing? Am I doing enough? Is anything even happening? Is this worth it? Like, I go through that as well. And so when people say, oh, well, I'm not going to vote, my vote doesn't matter, my voice doesn't count, I gently push back and say, well, if enough of us all say that, then it's actually going to come true. And we're actually doing it to ourselves. At least, I understand when things aren't moving fast, where it seems that there's not enough change. The way I'm built and the way I'm wired, I'd rather do whatever I can to fight in the hopes of getting something versus being guaranteed to not have any change at all. So I might as well, if the default is not having change at all, at least I'll try to do something to increase the circumstances. And if nothing changes, that doesn't change the status quo, then that's exactly what it was, but at least I gave it a shot. And I think the last thing I'll say about this is that it really reinforces why our year-round model is so important, is because we are able to catch those conversations not just in September of this year. I've caught those conversations the summer before a big election year, and being able to meet people say this phrase, meet people where they're at, right? This is the epitome of that. You're meeting them where they're at. You're understanding why they're pissed off and upset. There is a woman I spoke to, and she said she wasn't going to vote. Same thing. My vote isn't going to change. I just look out for me and my son. It's me and him against the world. I don't care about anything else. And so, like the seasoned organizer I am, I pivoted and I said, well, if you could be alone in the room with the governor to tell him all of the things that you are going through and your challenges, would you? She was like, oh yeah, put me in a room with whoever. I'll tell them everything. I'll tell these elected officials exactly what they need to know. So I was like, there's an opening there. She wasn't ready and confident in voting and thinking that voting was going to change, but she still wanted to make her voice heard, just in a different way. So sometimes you need to find these avenues and these openings where people are comfortable and be like, okay, we're going to ease you into this. Come to this meeting or do this, or, you ease people into it. You start to build that relationship. You start to peel back the layers and you start to connect those dots with that leadership development, with those research assignments. So people are seeing the system a little bit more broadly. And that is important to us, because if we are only knocking in, say, like September of this year, we can't have that conversation and expect them to vote 2 months later, like 6 weeks later. We are addressing some of those needs very early on. And we also know people want to see something tangible. They're like, the government doesn't work for me. Nothing happens. They don't listen to me. So I'm like, all right, what's a question that you want me to ask the governor? All right, got this meeting with them tomorrow. I'm going to ask them and I'm going to come back to you. Being able to provide those tangible results and those quick wins that people are like, oh, well, maybe when government is working right and being organized, something can happen. People haven't seen it work for them until you show that it can. System doesn't always work. We all know that, but it can work if you organize enough. And so being able to be patient with people and to take the time to show people what those avenues are and what kind of the broader systemic issues and barriers are also preventing these things from happening and changing as well too. We hear those things all the time.
Yeah, that is a big part of this work is talking about that and understanding the true impacts of like how politics just plays a role in our lives on a daily basis, even though we only really think about it at election time. Yeah, for sure. There's one more question, and it is, what advice, resources, and links do you have or know for organizing or mobilizing in Southern communities for Black population.
So I assume this is like southern states and not like south side, right?
That's what I'm taking it
Okay.
like southern states.
Southern states.
Not like, yeah, you know.
Gotcha. Um, so so Stacey Abrams, I know she's running for governor. I know there's a partisan aspect to her life right now, but Stacey Abrams really speaks a lot to the same model about year-round organizing, meeting people where they're at, registering people, building that collective power. So there's an organization in Georgia called the New Georgia Project that she helped found. A colleague of mine, Nsé Ufot, she is on all of the things. I think she was in like Time's most influential people recently. She is amazing. She's helping lead that organization, and she's doing that work on the ground. There are some organizations in Texas, the Texas Organizing Project, TOP. There's Advancing North Carolina. There's a lot of really great organizing that's happening in the South. And I know a lot of times people are like, we need a Stacey Abrams in every state. And a lot of us like, you got to find her. There is a Stacey Abrams in your state. And so I would start by researching and seeing the organizations that are on the ground. I know a lot of times people don't think that there are voter reg or anti-racist types of organizations in the South, but I guarantee you that they are. And they need just as much support. So being able to plug into them, and I would say amplifying their work and sharing their content, because they have gone through, Black organizers are going through it these last couple of years. The target on our back has gotten big. We've had to deal with infiltration and threats and all sorts of things. And so being able to support their work wherever you can, whether it's financially, with your time or resources. But something I always tell people is amplify the lived experience and the content of organizers of color right now, because we are collectively being gaslit about what is happening in our country and the racism that we're all experiencing. And it's really important to make sure that we're amplifying those voices on the ground as well. So that's what I always say. And happy if the other people want to reach out, if there's other like states in particular, if you want to see if I know or have any ideas of organizations to reach out to, feel free to send us an email or to reach out another way. And if I know somebody or if I know an organization, I'd be happy to let you know and connect you with them.
Awesome. I think that is a great close. And we have one more comment from Dr. Russ Dunkel. I hope that's how you say your name. Sorry, from DHS, just to make you aware of the PPE and distribution of N95s. And he provided the website for DHS on that, so that you're aware of that. So thank you for sharing that. And Angela, thank you so much for being here. This was a wonderful presentation with so much information. So thank you for your time, expertise, and sharing that with everyone. Again, for those in attendance, if you want to rewatch this presentation, if you missed something, it will be available on the website, along with all the other breakout sessions that happened during this time. Please make sure to fill out the evaluation. There is a link if you look in the Q&A box, but you'll also get one by email. So look for that. And again, for CEUs, you will receive information about getting those, confirming that those will come to you via email if you requested those. And we are going to go to a short break, but please remember that at 2 p.m. we do have our closing session of the conference, which is a conversation with Oceana Sawyer and Ali Muldrow. So we hope you can make that. There is a link to that also in the Q&A, but you can also find that in the registration. It is being streamed on the YouTube page for the UW-Madison School of Social Work. So we hope that everyone here will join us, and thanks you all for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.